Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Candido. I'm the CEO of Progressly. Thanks for joining us this morning. So today, our webinar is set to discuss how we define success in digital transformation. So a few quick things to highlight around the webinar. So this will be recorded, and then we will circulate the slides out within 24 hours. All of our attendees, you are muted, so if you have any questions, you can Q&A into the panel. Questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. If you'd like to live tweet us, the hashtag is ProgresslyWebinar on Twitter. And if you stick around at the end, we have a $250 Amazon gift card that we'll be giving out. Cool. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us. So take a quick second to do backgrounds. So my background, spent about the last 10 years thinking about enterprise technologies, first starting within the pharmaceutical space, which really was the first time that I had the opportunity to look inside of companies like General Electric, Kimberly-Clark, Novartis, and understand how much of their operations internally was non-digital. Spent some time running operations at companies and then looking at kind of innovative enterprise ways that we could support the line of business. So I've been working on Progressly for about the last 2 years. Team of about 30 folks in downtown Redwood City. And my job at Progressly is to make sure that everyone stays focused on our mission and continue to get the best people as possible, helping us on our journey.
Hi, thanks, Nick. I'm Peter Bell. I'm chairman of Palo Alto-based BCSV. I've been focused the last 30 years on really helping develop and provide technology into enterprises that help really with this idea of digital transformation, which I know we're going to be talking about this morning. And it's the idea of really how to get leverage in an organization where the teams, the employees at the companies can be much more productive through the way they use technology. And I've been fortunate to work over the last 3 decades with great entrepreneurs who are leading teams to provide these types of capabilities.
Hi, everyone. This is Linda Crawford. I've spent my entire career in enterprise software, most recently at Salesforce, where we were bringing a cloud solution to help companies be more agile, primarily focused working with customers who were trying to transform their go-to-market organizations, focused mostly on sales, and then most recently at Optimizely, helping marketers digitally transform the way they connect with their customers through experimentation and helping them make decisions much faster and much more data-driven.
And this is Clay Richardson, founder of Digital Fast Forward and CEO of Digital Fast Forward. And prior to launching Digital Fast Forward earlier this year, I led research for Forrester Research around business process management. And in my time at Forrester, and actually before I go there, so I've been in the BPM digital transformation field for the last 17 years. So helping companies from, working at a software vendor, rolling up my sleeves, actually building workflow solutions for clients from a consulting and services standpoint, all the way through to my role at Forrester, leading research around BPM. More recently, or right before I left Forrester, I started doing a lot of research around design thinking and really saw where design thinking was a powerful tool for driving innovation and helping teams become more creative. And so I decided to leave Forrester because I had so many clients asking me, how do we go about building these practices in our company using the technologies that are out there? And so I left Forrester to launch Digital Fast Forward, which is focused on helping teams implement digital transformation using design thinking and connecting that with the technology. So really excited to be here and be a part of this conversation.
Awesome. And thanks again to Peter, Linda, and Clay for joining us. So to start off, one thing that's going to kind of be the foundation of our discussion today is what are some of the key elements in thinking through how do you get started on digital transformation? What do you need to keep in mind in going through that journey? And then how do you ultimately define success? So before we kind of talk through the details, let's all kind of level set on how we define digital transformation for any of the companies that we've worked with, whether that's on the consulting side, as an investor thinking through supporting some of the larger enterprises in the world, or if you're the CEO of a company that's non-digital today. So why don't we start with you, Peter? How do you think about defining digital transformation? We may have dropped Peter. Linda, can you jump in? Start off with how you think about defining the term digital transformation.
Nick, I lost you for a second. I apologize.
No worries. Yeah, did you hear the question?
I think the question was defining
Perfect.
digital transformation. And I guess the way I think about it, when you hear the word, you think about some change that needs to happen or is happening or you want to have happen in your organization, where you can apply technology, software, systems, processes to sort of change how we as humans operate in a business. It also changes maybe how we're thinking about the products and services our companies or the companies we're involved with provide to their customers, and then how the customers, might use those products. And I think, if you look at Linda's background at Salesforce, there's obviously was software prior to Salesforce, but Salesforce it was really around a whole new way to use software. And I think, that's how I think about digital transformation. And I think, hopefully one of the topics we get into is some of the sort of, how do you get started, but then what are some of the big challenges, especially as you get into real scale. But I guess I think of digital transformation in short about really the change and the impact you can make by providing technology to the way we operate as humans.
Love it. And how about you, Linda?
Well, I think what got a lot of airplay many years ago was the transformation of marketing. You heard a lot about digital marketing, and to me that just meant how do you reach customers using new and innovative ways that were digital. But today, I think digital transformation to me means that every aspect of your company needs to examine itself and decide how bringing technology to your employees, to your prospective employees, to your customers can make you service your customers better and make you a more highly effective company. So it sort of gets to the root of everything you do. And like Peter said, it'll be good to talk about how you get started and where you start and how do you measure success.
Yeah, maybe if I can chime in also. This is Clay. I think it's an interesting question because we asked this on Twitter last week. This was our question of the week. How do you define digital transformation? And what we found is it really depends on what seat you're in the organization. I think as Linda was saying, it's, if you're in marketing, a lot of the marketing people that responded said, yeah, digital marketing, being able to connect with customers over channels. But then a lot of the process people said it's really about operations and being able to improve operations by using new tools and technology. And I think the key is, and I think Linda walked through this, is it needs to connect both of those worlds. That's what we're finding that works best in companies that are most mature around digital transformation are connecting that front-end customer experience, engaging the customer, with that back-end operational process improvement. So bringing those two worlds together is key.
I think that segments nicely too, Clay, for the next question. So how do you think about the role of IT of old? And then what do you think the role of IT needs to be moving forward to empower these enterprises in the way that you mentioned digital transformation?
I mean, a lot of what I'm seeing now, and even when I was at Forrester, is IT is really avoided, right? So I did a research, like I said, around design thinking, and I talked to a lot of design firms to say, hey, the IDEOs, the engine designs of the world, and just ask them, who do you work with in IT when you're doing new, innovative, driving transformation? And they said, we avoid IT like the plague because they slow transformation down, they slow the change down. And so I think a key ingredient here is not just IT bringing new technology, but IT, the culture and the mindset has to change. And so it's really about IT becoming more partners to help drive innovation and using new tools that can spark creativity, being open to brainstorming. And in a way, I say this to my customers, I think, people in IT need to go through a detox where they're not bringing the logical brain to the conversation first when they're talking to the business. It needs to be more, how can we experiment and bring more creativity to these conversations? And that's just a new skill set that IT has to build, a new muscle that IT has to build.
Right. And one of the things that we hear from our customers over here at Progress is digital transformation isn't something that can be thought of as a project or initiative, meaning there's one particular part of your business that you have to digitize. It has to be something that you're going to work on until you're unified in terms of the tools that you're using that help people do their job more effectively with better consistency. So, but that opens up the question, when you look at who's actually responsible for digital transformation, do you see this as a tops-down thing, starting with the CEO, or do you see it as a bottoms-up initiative with the people who experience the pain of working in a non-digital way? Either Peter or Linda, if anything there rings a bell.
Well, I think it's a good question, Nick. I think that, on the, kind of top-down or bottoms-up, when you hear something top-down, for me, it connotes something that's like forced. Having said that, I think it's maybe not the answer you wanted, but I think it's got to be both. I think it's got to be part of the sort of the culture of the company, a culture around innovation and change, and that typically starts really with the DNA of the company, and if the DNA isn't there, it's got to be, you have to get it, and that usually starts at the top, but then you have to get the team, whether that's 5 people on a small team or if it's 50,000 in a large company, you have to get the team to buy into that, to buy into the culture, and then you have to, it has to be part of the business, the mission, the strategy of the company. That's why I completely agree with your comment that it can't be some type of project. Let's get this done in a year and we'll be digital. So it's really got to be part of the culture and the strategy. And then you have to sort of, measure it. What are the goals of this transformation? And, it's a long journey, but what are the mileposts along the way where we can measure the impact we're having on our business, our customers, our product, our competitive position? So those are some of the things I guess I think about when your question around, where does it come from, the top or the bottom?
Love it. And Linda, I think that dovetails almost perfectly into a lot of your experience, because one of the things that we see is that at an executive level, the buy-in has to be around technologies and solutions, and in particular, cloud technologies that open up mobile and data capabilities that, if it's an on-premise environment, you're not able to actually leverage. So how do you kind of think about the executive level conversation around why the cloud and hosted solutions matter, and then also working with the line of business that has very real things that they need support on day to day to do their job?
Yeah, well, I think even going back a little bit to what we were just talking about, at the executive level, um, I find most executives are driven to transformation because they need to remain, their companies need to remain competitive. So if it's not by just recognizing the trend and trying to jump on the bandwagon, a lot of it's just, hey, how do I survive? How do I be more competitive? Because somebody is probably disrupting you, whether it's a traditional competitor or a new one. And then I think for just the general population of employees within a company, they have so much more access to technology today than we used to have 20 years ago, where you literally had to get IT to install something on a corporate network. Today, with the cloud, there's free trials, there are get it for freemium models, get it for free, swipe a credit card for $1,000 to use some solution. And employees are smart and they want to get their job done better. They want to serve their customer in new and exciting ways, and they're just going to do it. And I think the role of IT and the executive ranks is, how do you stitch the good stuff that employees find? I feel like it's very bottoms up these days to create a solution for a company. So to have the company mindset, not just two or three employees in a department. If something's really that good, how do you get it into the DNA of the company? And the cloud lets you do that much more quickly. It democratized the decision making, I think, around technologies a lot more than people recognize. I saw that especially in the marketing space, where there's proliferation of good technology available to marketers today.
Yeah, and just to cite a few examples, I think, of companies that are kind of realizing that they need to change their narrative a little bit to stay competitive. Shell, who's one of our biggest supporters, has already stated that they no longer see themselves as an energy company. You have a company like General Electric that sees themselves now more as a software company than anything else. And I remember years ago working with Nike, where they made an internal announcement that they were now a data company. And it's really, I think these companies know that technology is a way that they can stay forward thinking and agile to capitalize on what they have to do next. And another one for you, Linda, that I think kind of ties to what we started off on in talking about some of these definitions. So when we think through all the moving parts of digital transformation, what advice do you have for kind of the enterprise leaders? What are some of the challenges to keep in mind, and how do you think about measuring success through this evolution?
Yeah, I think that it kind of gets back to really understanding your mission, and then how does the technology apply to the mission that you're on. And then I'm a big fan personally of kind of starting smaller and experimenting, and then if it works, you do a broader rollout. It used to be that when you had an idea and you wanted to apply technology, it could be very expensive and you'd have a long lead time. Today, you can turn on a cloud solution in a matter of minutes. You can get people logged into a solution in a matter of minutes. And then it's just the harder part is, how do you take the processes, the people within your company, and rally them around an idea? And then I think that you need that, and then a list of prioritize your list of what you're going to do, and how do you have measures associated to the things that you're trying to accomplish. And in any kind of part of the business, the measures and the metrics can be different. It could be customer engagement, it could be lead time to get a product out the door, it could be how many leads that you're getting. I mean, depending on the part of the business you're in, you're going to have different outcomes that you're trying to drive for. But I also think employee engagement is a really big one in these days, where we have a younger and younger workforce who are highly tech savvy. If you're making your employees feel better about what they do, they stay with your company longer. I think that's another thing for companies to keep their eye on.
Right. And even one of the things that we've heard within some of the traditional industrial industries that we worked with is engagement is such a huge driver, because it means that you've codified a lot of the institutional knowledge, which is the operations of the business. And it's going to make you more attractive when you need to recruit a younger workforce. Millennials will already do represent the largest generation of the workforce today, and will be more than half of the workforce in the next 5 years. And they want to be using technologies that other industries have in place, right? So I think there's an industry profile piece, and then there's definitely kind of engagement that can represent the line of business and IT. How about you, Peter? What do you think are probably some of the initial challenges that companies may face? How do you think about navigating around some of those challenges, and what does success look like maybe in months versus years as you look at the entire digital transformation process?
I think one is often because if you're really not, or the management team or the company's competitive position says, hey, we're not really competitive because we're not digital. So it can be such a daunting situation. Is where do you start? Where can you get some successes along the journey? And then do the employees on the team have the skills that you need, the skills and the mindset? And I just went through this. Part of this is part of the team in a large, very large organization. Where I would say it was fairly, and it was an organization that I've been involved with for a long time, but we were definitely behind, and we essentially picked one particular project area that was part of this longer term journey, and what that allowed us, it was basically taking a 30-year-old mainframe database, and that really didn't provide the information from decision making we needed, and we picked a small function there and moved to the cloud, but then really had a team that worked with various I'll call it business units. We could kind of measure the success, and it took probably a little longer than we thought. It took about 1.5 years, but through that we were able to get a lot of buy-in. And use that as sort of the case study throughout the organization, and it also showed us some of the kind of trainings and other workshops we needed to do for our employees, as we sort of embarked on more of an enterprise-wide approach.
Well, great example. And Clay, one of the things that you mentioned early on that I really liked was kind of the unification of the customer experience in the back end of business, right? So some of the stuff that might not be seen as, the most attractive piece of what you're doing, but it's really the nuts and bolts tied to how your organization works. So when you think about digital operations, the ability to leverage technology to organize in an innovative and frictionless way, it's really operations today are connecting the people who are in the field working with customers with the people who might be in corporate that spend more of their time in front of a computer. So how do you kind of think about different companies on the maturity scale, and how do you kind of jump in depending on where you are in that spectrum?
Yeah, I think it's important to where companies that are mature, they really see that, this front end excitement around digital transformation, that's not connected to the back end operations, it's lipstick on a pig. One of the customers that I worked with a couple of years back, this was in financial services, banks selling savings bonds, they wanted to recreate their whole experience for younger savers, right? So people that, millennials that are saying, hey, we want to figure out how do we save money better, and we want to buy savings bonds. And so what we ended up doing is really looking at that front-end experience saying, hey, this needs to be mobile, over social, Facebook, the whole nine. But then when we got into okay, let's look at the processes underneath around getting savings bonds. That was a 30, 40, 50-year-old process that was all paper-based. They hadn't even thought about digitizing. And so the operational piece is what needed to be updated and digitized in order to make it frictionless to actually support that customer experience. Otherwise, you have people that have a great experience clicking through, buying a savings bond on Facebook, but then that back end, they're getting emailed, or not emailed, but mailed, paper mail, beneficiary sign-off information, right? And that's in banking, it's in energy, it's in all these industries where, there are people that are doing this great innovation on the front end, but it's these processes. And I came across a quote I want to share. I was reading this article that was talking about design thinking and how important it is. And I thought the author, Faisal Hoque, did a great job of calling out that it's not new processes that always need to be innovated or you need to be innovative. It's really these old processes. So he said, contrary to popular belief that design thinking is only used for a new product or service, it is the existing business processes that greatly benefit from design thinking. And so we have to, where we see customers that are mature, they're bringing those sort of innovation practices to redesign business processes in operations, but they're also using technology that makes it easy for the business to actually make those changes. So you don't have to use IT. I think both Linda and Peter were alluding to this earlier. And so having no-code, low-code solution is really key when it comes to digital operations, where the business doesn't have to rely on IT to make the change. And I think the key metric when you're trying to measure maturity and where companies at in terms of digital operations, the key metric should be a speedometer, right? It should be how quickly are we making these changes? Are we going, 30 miles an hour? Are we going 50? Are we going 70, 100? And so the low-code, no-code platforms give you a way to dramatically speed up the time that it takes to make changes in operations. So I think that's important to digital when we talk about digital operations.
Yeah. And one of the things that I find myself talking about a lot with our customers is kind of the arc of enterprise innovation. And I think, Linda, I'll kick this one over to you. So companies are either in a stage where they're non-digital, they're using on-premise solutions, they've implemented some type of cloud system of record, or they've moved to what I would call a system of engagement. In looking at the CRM space, Linda at Siebel was an on-premise version. Salesforce was the cloud version of that as a system of record. In the company that I was a part of, where Linda was one of the people behind an acquisition decision at Salesforce, was RelateIQ. And we saw ourselves as the system of engagement that a sales rep would use, no longer the system that just the sales manager wanted to enforce. In winning on things like the ability to work cross-platform, have social and collaboration features, and get better as people use the product more and more were kind of key differentiators. So Linda, how do you think about kind of the on-premise cloud or engagement stage of companies, and what's the next step depending on where they are in that spectrum?
Well, I think that companies that are still on-premise, to Clay's point, they're probably still there because the system and the processes are so complex and intertwined with other things that are old and brittle. And, I think most companies are trying to chip away at that. And then the trick is, how do you layer on more agile solutions on top of that that do help you integrate some of that legacy to the more modern age, But I think even the early cloud solutions are being rethought today because of the next generation of solutions which are using more data science and intelligence to make those systems work better for the employees or the customers. And I don't think that you need the most sophisticated systems to take advantage of some of these things. Some of them are just really trying to mine data in emails or trying to be more proactive on the time with which people engage you as a company. Do they tend to engage you in the morning or the afternoon? There's really simple ways, I think, to get started with this notion of leveraging the data that you have in your company. And I think just saying, well, we don't have enough data, as Clay, I think, said earlier, isn't an excuse for not doing anything. So I'd say that most companies today need to be looking at kind of the next wave, which is around data and analytics. I think it's been talked about for now. It feels like it's even an old term to me, but
Right.
that is where you truly get leverage, is when your processes can be more intelligent.
Awesome. Peter, anything to add?
Well, I think, Linda's seen so much is from her vantage point at Salesforce and Optimizely. I think if you look at the most recent data that I've seen, about overall, not just enterprise, but companies, about 79% of workloads are in the cloud. It's about half and half. I think it's a slight edge in all enterprises to public cloud, but it's very close. So about 40-40. It's a larger percentage in the private cloud in large enterprises, but clearly the trend line is there. I think it's my view, it's definitely going to be a hybrid world, but there's still major issues in terms of what's really, when you get to scale, what's the real cost? Because you have often there's an idea that we're going to have significant efficiencies when we move into, say, a public cloud, but there's this issues on kind of utilization. There's issues around security. You go from a paper-based world, which has inherent issues around security and who sees what and what gets lost and what's saved and what's archived. But there's a whole new slew of issues that emerge. So, and then there's just a fear. There's a fear of loss of control. So, I'm a big believer in the cloud and what's happening and the impact and the agility, but there really has to be a compelling business case. And I think some of the work that you've seen, Nick, in terms of I'll call it opportunities where you have this paper-based environment, and that's a great start to sort of begin the digital transformation of a business. And whether it's a public cloud or private cloud, there is more efficient ways than there had been 5 years ago, or even a couple of years ago, to achieve that in a way that has that meets sort of the capital requirements that a company may have.
Right, and also too, I think it's probably worth kind of talking through some of the risks that companies look at today and thinking through what's the business case to get digital. And one of the things that we've heard over and over again is just information security when it's outside of a system and you have mission critical information that's written down on paper or it's getting emailed around in Excel spreadsheets. How do you actually look at the cost of that not being codified in a way where other people can collaborate in a strategic way? And then also if someone walks out the door of your company and they have things that actually can't be kind of brought back into the business where you can control who has access from a provisioning standpoint. it can create a really, really difficult scenario. And I think we've even heard some of that with tools that I think have kind of cracked the distribution model, a la Slack, where you could have several different units within a company, but because it can't be managed by IT or a CIO, that imposes a huge amount of risk because that's information that's really not secure based on how they see it. Any other kind of, and I know, Linda, I think at Salesforce, with the trust initiative, you had done a phenomenal job of kind of making customers feel comfortable with everything that you brought to the table from a cloud perspective. How did you play the security conversation with the customers that you had worked with?
Well, it took a long time. I mean, Salesforce being one of the early pioneers of the cloud, we really had to be evangelists of what it meant and the agility that it brought in the organization, but at the same time, the inherent risks, as you pointed out, on the security side. And, it started with like data centers and all of those kinds of things, but at the end of the day, a lot of it boils down to your own employees and how they treat security. So, we were trying to be very transparent around the systems itself and how they were operating. I think it's pretty widespread today where you're constantly trying to harden your data center, whether it's through a cloud provider or through your own centers. But at the end of the day, I think most of the breaches kind of come from the employees themselves. And I know the companies that we work with in Salesforce itself, it was a matter of really training the employees and doing annual certifications on security and the way that you treated company confidential information or customer information. So there's definitely a technology side to it, but probably more importantly, there's a cultural side to it too.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for your time. Peter, Linda, and Clay, I think it was a really insightful discussion around how to think about digital transformation, what are some of the key moving parts, and how can we kind of approach this together no matter where we sit in the conversation, whether that's helping companies bring in digital technologies, working inside organizations to adopt it, or playing an executive level conversation around why this is a strategy that's going to define the future. So I'd love to keep the conversation going on Twitter. Again, the hashtag is Progressly Webinar. And really just want to call out the great group of people that we have on the webinar today. So industries like energy and utilities, transportation, chemicals, and retail. I think for a lot of these industries that have definitely cracked the value proposition, the question is, how do you continue to evolve what we're doing? And I think digital platforms are that way forward. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and we'll talk to everyone online.
Thanks, Nick.